Welcome to We Are the Remedy, where each week we highlight a person from the community who embodies the idea of people helping people. Hello and welcome to We Are the Remedy at Desire to Inspire Studios Foundation. My name is Trevor Henley and I'm the inspirational activist here. We have with us the Honorable Cell Phone Blowing Up Michael Pritchard. Who will introduce a second later. And we're very fortunate to have Lori Frugoli with us, the district attorney for Marin County. And so, Michael, would you
I am so sorry, folks. Yes, my cell phone hardly ever rings. But what I was going to say is Trevor and I have been friends a long time, since he was a youngster. 21 years ago, he was on my show, and we've developed, with his great staff of interns and folks that work at Desire to Inspire Studios, the opportunity to bring solutioneers of wisdom, kindness, and compassion and justice to today. My good friend Lori Frugoli, who I've known for 40 years, and also to just be grateful to the opportunity that what we do here is with our interns, we teach as we go along how to build community spirit, love, compassion, and unity. And community unity is what saves us. So for me, you know, just talking to Lori and you as well, because you experienced the television show that we did called Saving Our Schools from Hate and Violence. Mm-hmm. So it was about gun violence at Columbine, and Lori and many of her great staff and our community partners at School Law Enforcement Partnership that I attend many times have come up with great ideas about this stuff as the district attorney's office partners with the Health and Human Services, partners with recovery folks, and that kind of stuff. So could you share with us what you think that we're finding, the insights that we're finding on ways to solve the issue of gun violence in our communities now lately?
We're lucky in Marin. It's an incredibly safe community, but it's statewide. This was the highest. I think 500,000 handguns were sold in 2020 in the state. We don't have the data from Marin, but the grand jury did a report a couple of years ago and estimated 100,000 firearms are in our county. So the important thing, one collaborative that I'm involved in is the Marin County Gun Safety Collaborative, and it's about gun safety, mindful that there are guns in our community and we can't deny that. And so we look at important issues such as safe gun storage. We've done a forum on that. We just did a gun forum on gun violence restraining orders, which are orders that law enforcement can obtain if they become aware of a situation where somebody is a danger to themselves or the community. And there's many people that can report those incidents to law enforcement. Anybody can, but school teachers were just added to that group among others, and managers of businesses and law enforcement, of course. But the collaborative itself is beautiful because it's not just me in the DA's office. It's not just the public defender and the probation department. We have a collaborative of community partners, and that's the only way, in my view, to get things done. One person cannot answer all these questions. It's a national problem and a community problem too. So we just need to work together, and so we have Moms Demand Action, Brady, religious leader, as Michael said, the Department of Health is involved. Really important, one of our partners is the Suicide Prevention Collaborative, which is a whole nother collaborative that joined us, and we have leaders.
Yeah, we've been dealing with that here with our own staff, you know,
right,
with helping with suicide and overdose stuff. But, you know, for me, you know, this I like to ask you, because you were there in 1999. You were a young person in high school, and as the innocence, as Ra has mentioned before, was really shattered by the shooting at Columbine. Subsequent, you probably didn't know this, Lori, Trevor and I were doing another show with folks with Reiki in the same area as Littleton and Boulder, and another incident happened this year where 10 people were killed at a supermarket. And so these incidences, that's 21 years apart. Same location, 14 the first time, 10 this time. You're seeing this, and now you're an adult grown male, and you went from high school into being a dad yourself. What are you learning, and what can we do, all of us, to help ameliorate this situation?
Well, I think one of the things that you keep saying is people cry with bullets instead of tears.
Right.
And I think part of what we're doing here and bringing to the show and
Yes.
bringing hopefully awareness to is, look, it's safe to tell people what's going on in your life.
Right.
It's safe to tell people and be vulnerable what you're struggling with.
Yes.
And for us, it's like if we can reach those points in people's lives before they take the next step
Right.
to cry with bullets instead of tears,
Right.
I feel like our job is not done, but our job is done well.
Right.
Because then we're there to be able to give someone a voice, to help tell their story or help share their pain or help find resources to alleviate the pain. So
many feel, sorry to interrupt you, it's a public health crisis.
yeah,
On many levels. It's not just a law enforcement problem, and parents just need to be aware. And we had a national expert, Dr. Wintemute from UC Davis, and the primary driver is if you see something, say something.
yeah.
Why is it so
And
important,
so,
Lori?
No,
Yeah, it is. But why? Why?
Because
Tell them.
you could save someone's life.
Right.
And
Right.
he gave a classic example of 21 cases where gun violence restraining orders were obtained, and that's an order where you go to court with judicial, oversight and explain the problem, and the judge says, oh, and if there's firearms in that person's possession or home, law enforcement can temporarily remove them from that situation. And Dr. Wintemute had 21 cases where that was the specific threat, and 21 potential mass shootings did not happen.
Wow.
And then on the other side of people who harm themselves, they've shown that just separating ammunition from the weapon in a home can significantly decrease suicides because it's such a spontaneous decision.
Impulse.
So, right.
Yeah,
And
right.
so on every small level, just telling your child, oh, if you find out there's a firearm and a gun where your kid's going to, you want to ask questions. Is there a gun in your home? Do you keep it locked up in your safe?
Right.
And law enforcement, I was a police officer before. I always made sure that when I went places where there was children, that I
You would ask that question.
and and say my firearm's at home, or it's somewhere else, but it's not with me here. But there's so many things that parents don't think about asking, much like
Right.
alcohol and other things in people's homes. But it's important, and we just sent out 5,000 notices as part of our collaboration with the Office of Education to parents, reminding them about gun safety. And 5,000 parents got that information because of our collaborative. So
Wow.
It's amazing. And I know gun purchasing has been through the roof. I don't know the numbers.
Yeah.
I'm sure you probably
Is
have better
this
idea.
all fear driven? Do you guys think? Do you think it's just if I have a gun, better to have and not need than the need and not have, or what?
Probably to a certain degree, because the stat that I knew, and again, I don't know the numbers, but it was first-time gun buyers are through the roof. Like the purchases and the sales are astronomical during COVID. And
What is making us so anxious during this time? What do you think?
I wish I had the answer to that.
Yeah.
So many things, but the data also shows often first-time gun owners can get harm themselves with them as well.
Right.
I mean, that's known data. People want to find some scary information, go to the UC Davis website on the gun safety. It's pretty
Yeah.
frightening, but I think some people were fearful, their firearms are going to be taken away with new legislation, so perhaps they felt the need to find them or to defend themselves in their homes. I mean, crime is
Right.
up in some areas, and it's just hard to say. I think everybody has their own personal reason for it.
I laugh with the gun safety. I have a scar in my hand because during COVID we got a little hand BB gun, And it was entertaining, and I was practicing with it, and I don't claim to be the smartest man in the world. And I was catching the BBs because they were falling out, and then one time I decided to accidentally, I was catching the BB, but point blank, and shot myself and put a BB in my hand. So I was like, well, there's my gun safety tip.
Yeah.
You know, but
it's instructive, though, isn't it? How simple it can be in action.
How quickly.
Right.
And how quickly it
happen.
changed. And then I got the hand surgery, and it was like your BB is actually in a really precarious place that could take away feeling from your entire hand. And I'm like, because I'm an idiot. All right, great. And for me, this scar will be an internal reminder of how much of an idiot I am sometimes.
And it seemed like such an innocent thing.
Yeah.
A little BB. How could that harm anybody?
Yeah. And so it's, I look at little lessons like that as like, thank you.
Wake up call.
That's for sure. But if it was a real gun, or if I happen to be looking down it, or, whatever, it's amazing the gun safety is not there.
Yeah, for sure. And a lot of people, hunters often are very, very safe with their guns.
Right.
More often than not. And some people
Overly cautious,
and I think there are some people who are
way.
hunters
Right.
who have seen it because they see what happens.
Yes.
And people tend to think they're the problem, and that's not always the case.
That's not the case.
There's so many cases where people's firearms that they buy for their own protection are used against them.
Right.
Because they're not really capable and confident with it. And there are places you can go to take hunter safety and gun safety courses.
Why is that so important, do you think, Lori? Because,
I think Trevor just showed you.
Yeah.
And that was with a BB.
But we have many of our good friends are hunters and fisher people and outdoorsmen and horsemen and horseback folks. And, they are remarkably cautious around these things, But, for me, I'm thinking about this. I remember I filmed this special with Mr. Brown with Novato folks after the Ramon Salcido case. And that was an intense situation of domestic violence where a man did devastating harm to his family. But the impact to me wasn't just in the community, the officers that dealt with this, and the impact on Chief Brady and his young officers was remarkably overwhelming. Because you have post-traumatic stress disorder from just witnessing the impact of this kind of stuff. Exactly. And that violence, it resonated through the young officers sharing their hearts, because they had families themselves. And the chief was very eloquent when he spoke about dealing with a young officer he had to deal with who he was not aware of, had an incident where he was actually involved with taking the children to the hospital. And I think and the impact on him as a young rookie officer, I think that what we learn is that this has ripple effects, this violence. And so all the more urgent for us to deal with it emotionally, right? And with prevention in mind, and with training, and with community education and partnership. Right. And this is kind of essentially where you've been leading us in the community too, correct?
Right. And to acknowledge that there are, especially now, it's hard enough to be a child in this community growing up, and especially you compound it with COVID and all the other issues going on nationally. We really have to be watching our children closely, because we have you don't need me to tell you, Michael, a very high rate of suicide of youth in our community. And that really is a position where if you see something, say something. And I think you can't say that enough. And it's okay to say, are you all right? And so... Even
at risk of losing your friend.
Right.
As a friend, as opposed to losing your friend as losing their life.
Right.
We had one of our moms mention that it was only afterwards that one of the librarians had said, I kept seeing your son sad and lonely, and I wanted to reach out, but I never said anything. And now I'm living with the regret of not having stepped out. So see something, say something to be reminded, Lori, that's...
And that regret is painful. And then
Yes.
on another level,
That's a forever regret.
We just started our first ever Veterans Treatment Court.
Right.
There's so many veterans who, especially maybe when they retire, and law enforcement is one of the primary areas where this happens. People go from being a veteran to some kind of public safety position, and then they retire, and then they really start contemplating all that they've seen, and it can be devastating. You and I know that.
Trauma, yeah.
But there's so much of that going on that we really need to be paying attention to our veterans, and we have a lot of seniors in this county who are veterans, and
Right.
there's firearms in their homes too, and then you have compounded with dementia. There's really a lot of areas where we can help people, but you have
Sean
to-
Stevens and you are doing remarkable work with our Veterans Court, right? And he's a terrific asset in our community, Sean.
He is, and again,
Great
to
heart.
be clear, and it's not just Sean and I. It's
Right.
There's a judge, and we have a retired San Francisco DA who's helping us, and
Oh,
we
great.
have veterans treatment people and probation,
Right.
and the public defender. It's a team. Like we are a team, and so I really
Kind of like a
refer to
treatment
us-
team.
We are a
almost.
treatment
Yeah.
team. That's we specifically called it Veterans
Really?
Treatment Court.
Good.
But it's a collaborative, and sometimes that's going to be harder work than just taking a period of good behavior, right? So it's a team, and we work together to do what's right to keep people safe, including the person who is a veteran who did something, and who they may harm.
Lori,
it's also
you have an experience. I mean, I don't mean to interrupt you, but I'm gonna come back but you were a cop on the streets. You've pulled your gun. You've had guns pulled on you, and it's taught you in a very valuable way. And you're not an elite person. You're a person grounded and anchored in the job and the mission of law enforcement. Then the Justice Department as an assistant district attorney, and now as a district attorney. What has all of that taught you about how to talk to the public about the impact of this gun violence?
The number one thing as I've learned is you just never stop learning, and don't ever think you know everything.
Wow.
There's always something people can teach you, but that we cannot single-handedly conquer these community problems by ourselves. We have to work together and educate people and appreciate the value of someone who might be a better spokesperson for the message we need to get out there, and who know people who can help. I mean, that's my number one thing is really my administrative assistant has a little tablet on her desk, and it says, "We can do this." And that's not number one. That's our mindset, because when I became DA, a lot of people, the number one thing I heard, especially from law enforcement, was, how come every time we ask you something or your office or have a suggestion, the answer is we don't do that. We don't do that. And I thought, you know what? Sometimes that might be the case, but then explain why. Or you can say, maybe we can do that. And then the next thing is how. Who do we need to engage and partner with and gain the trust to make this happen? And so to work in certain communities with our collaborative, we're going to have to gain some trust, clearly. And it may not come from me. It might come from a community partner. And that's really what we're driving at.
Community partnerships.
So
Trevor,
we believe fully that there's more together that we can do than we can ever do. More we can do together than we can ever do on our own.
Right.
I've always believed in collaboration over competition in the terms of business, right? But collaboration goes so much further, because you don't know what you don't know until you know that you don't know it, right? And so going back to your years of in this industry and being a cop and being now the district attorney and the assistant, is collaboration a new thing, or what are some of the firsts or the benchmarks that make you feel like you're on the right track?
It's not a new thing. We have had collaborative courts for years. We also had some collaboration in the community, but not as many as we do now. And that was my commitment. I could see it. If people don't know what we're doing, and whose fault is that? Right? If people don't know, whose fault is that? That's our fault.
Right.
So it's our job to get out there and do that, but also on the community level. Like, I have a community group of people who probably didn't really understand me or what I stood for or even support me before I took the position I did. So we started a community group, and we sit down on a regular basis, and I've shown them this is how our case management system works. This is how come we can't provide you some data, but what data would you like to see? What do you think is important? What programs do you know about on a national level that I might not know about? And it's really been a wonderful and positive experience. And I've been told I'm one of the few DAs in the nation doing this, which seems amazing.
Mind-blowing?
Yeah, that's it.
So you're
Yeah, but
sitting
it's
down,
leadership, isn't
Yeah,
it? You got to lead.
You're
Yeah.
sitting down with the common folk, and you're sitting with from all different backgrounds, demographics, all of it, right? And you're sitting down with the leaders of the community. Why?
Because it's the number one, it never was done before, and it's necessary, and it's the only way we're going to hear what people's problems are and their suggestions on how we can make this better.
Right.
You can't be sitting in your office thinking you know everything, because that's very dangerous. So, and also
Fast track to nowhere.
people need to feel heard,
Right.
right? And
Yes.
we hear it from our youth all the time.
Yeah.
Nobody's listening.
Right.
And so if you don't hear those people on it like this, like we're talking now,
Right.
that's different than even Zoom or taking a phone call or
Right.
being in front of them answering questions. But this is more meaningful to me, and people need to be heard. Even if you don't agree with them, even if at the end of the day I have to tell somebody, yeah, I can't do that, or it's not going to work, whatever it is, at least they feel heard. And that's important. I think that's a big problem right now, is especially with our youth, they don't feel like they're being heard.
And if they are, it's for 0.5 seconds on Snapchat or something
Right.
like that, right?
Right. And the term I hear so much is performative. Right? You know, yeah, you listened to me and then you went right along your way and didn't do anything about it. So we really are trying to show that we not only are we the change, we're going to do something about it. We're going to listen to you, and if we can't make the change, we're going to tell you why.
Right. 2 ears and 1 mouth and using them proportionately.
Yeah.
That's amazing, right? It is a concept.
Yeah.
Well-
it reminds me also of like the homeless, stories, like where you've, and I've been there as well. But when you sit down with the homeless instead of trying to help them,
Yeah. Right.
right? That's more rewarding to them in so many more ways
Right.
than even giving them a meal if they
Right.
aren't going to have a meal that day. The time spent is so much more rewarding. It fills their soul.
Nurture is food for the soul.
Right.
And what, for me, I remember Robin and I went and did a Salvation Army show. We were walking out, and one of the old timers who was homeless, he goes, "Hey, Pritchard and Robin, thanks for doing this show here, because near as I can figure out, everybody wants to do something for us, but hardly anybody wants to do anything with us."
Right?
Right.
And I said, that was so soulfully overwhelming to both he and I. We got out in the car and I said, "Do you believe that just happened?" And he goes, "Instructive." And he went on HBO with Billy Crystal, Whoopi Goldberg, and they did great telethons to help homeless veterans and everybody. And it was great. It was a comic relief, they called it, and it went on for years, right? And so when you see that you can make an impact in a person who's an influencer, who can then, that idea comes to them that we have to do this. This is when we get a hold of the millionaires and the billionaires and the influencers in the technology companies to come. And I think, the Mark Benioff, Zuckerberg, all of these folks can come, and his wife, who's a physician. Mark's wife is a great physician, and they've done so much. But to get them to participate in the solutioneering of these things, and then helping us with their platforms. Jack Dorsey from Twitter, very smart guy, Catholic school kid from DeBerg High School, and he donated $1 billion. Benioff donated $500 million. Many of our folks here in the community who are wise, Jeff Bezos's wife, former wife, Mackenzie Scott, has donated $17 billion. So we have awareness that can help us, but it's for us to start getting programs out there. Here's where the need is. That's why what you do is important. That's why what you do is important. And saying, here's the need. Fund this need. Fund this need.
But
right?
to your point, it's much more meaningful and might, at the end of the day, give a person more help. It's one thing to drive past a group of people and say, oh, I see that, there's a problem.
Right.
It's another thing to have an idea about how to solve it, but to take it the next step and for you to sit down with someone who's in that position.
Right.
And have them hear from you how you could help them. And when you walk away, you have no idea what influence you had on that person.
Right.
That might just be the change to go, yeah, you know what, the next time they bring Downtown Streets team brings the showers, I might do that.
Yeah.
You know, and so you just never know what it might take to be the step or the change for the person, but you have to see them individually and let them know that you see them and you're not judging them.
I remember working on Project Hope in East Palo Alto with the Reverend down there. Great guy, great preacher. And we brought showers and simple stuff. Trucks brought showers and washers and dryers in. Because if you can clean your clothes and you can get a shower, it revitalizes your spirit, right? And when we do this kind of stuff, and it's community participation, then that anger, you know, as I try to tell everybody, when you want to know where gun violence comes from, unaddressed grief turns to anger, the anger to rage, rage to violence. Violence has two directions, outwards towards others, inwards towards the self, and sometimes simultaneously the same. And anybody in law enforcement can tell you a person who's suicidal can become homicidal as well.
Well, that's a lot of mass shootings. They believe the initial thought was suicide. And then if they're going to do it to themselves, and they're going to take people with them.
If I don't care what happens to me, I don't care what happens to you.
And that is really something that Dr. Wintemute at UC Davis is finding out, that and other people have written books on it actually, that some of these things start out with a different mindset than what you might be thinking.
You are such a gift. You are such a gift to us.
I kind of want to ask something slightly off topic, but it's going back to the idea of the show is that we highlight people that embody the idea of people helping people.
Super privileged. My parents were blue collar people and moved to Marin because my father loved gardening, and he read a book by Luther Burbank who said the best weather in California is Santa Rosa and Marin. So my parents just happened to move to Marin, and they also wanted to be close to the city for the newspaper business. And so, and they were just in the advertising part. Just my mom answered the phone and took ads for the Chronicle. So I was raised here, went to local schools, and always loved animals, was involved in 4-H. And then in high school, Bob Romier, who's responsible for us having a lot of our open space here in the county, he came to my high school class. It was just, again, you never know who you're going to influence. And after he spoke about contributing, as he was our supervisor then, we were tasked with writing a paper about how we might want to contribute and be part of government. And so because I thought I was going to be a dog trainer at the time, I went and rode along with a police officer who had a police dog. And the minute I saw what police officers really do and how they help people, I made the decision to be a peace officer. So that took a few years because there weren't many women in law enforcement. So eventually I worked my way a little bit through the Santa Fe Police Department. I started as a meter maid to get the skills to deal with people face to face and get a little bit of maturity on that level. And
well, that's a great petri dish, isn't it, for conflict resolution?
It was, and it was a police chief. You know, you have mentors along the way. You might not appreciate it at the time, but the police chief at that time, Hank Ingerson, I applied to be a dispatcher. And he said, I thought you wanted to be a police officer. And I said, well, I do. And he said, then you're going to wait and you're going to be a meter maid because you need to deal with conflict resolution. And at the time, I was a little miffed. I thought, but I want that job right now. That pays more money. But he was right. But,
wise mentor.
But I didn't appreciate that or realize it at the time. When people were threatening on the street, when I wrote them tickets, then I became appreciative. But it helped me. And I ended up getting hired by the Santa Rosa Police Department and ended up having the downtown walking beat because I wanted to be out by myself, proving myself on my own. And it just seems like full circle that one of the places I walked around was Luther Burbank's home in downtown Santa Rosa.
Wow.
So it's like, what? It's just amazing sometimes. So
Yeah.
I was there for 6 years.
Great story.
Always went to school. Got my bachelor's degree, and the more I went to court, they put me in investigations. The more I went to court, I'm like, oh, this is where change really happens. So I put myself through law school and married my husband. He was super supportive on the way, and always knew I wanted to be a prosecutor after spending time in court. And I got my dream job at the DA's office. Like now, it's been 30-something years, and worked my way up. And the
Your Gary was something special.
He was. And he taught me a lot. He taught me to listen and not to judge people. There were very few people that he didn't. He couldn't find something positive about. Like we can sit down and find our common ground, and I really carry that with me because it's really important.
Yeah, you do.
You always have something in common with people, and you might have to dig, but you can find it, and then you can move forward and really make change. So, and the opportunity came to make change in this county as the DA, and I just love it. I love collaborating with people, and it was hard at first to go places where I didn't know people. But one of my great mentors said, if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. And I really
There's a lot of turkeys out there that need to know that.
Right.
And I've gone to many things where I don't know a soul, and I just tell myself, okay, just go in there and meet 10 people you never met before.
Right.
And sometimes I'll just tell them, I don't know anybody here, but I'd like to meet you because I've made this little goal for myself today to meet 10 people I don't know.
Right.
And I met really wonderful people doing that. So, and that was not in my that wasn't one of my skills before, so.
Yeah, but they met a wonderful person in you as well.
Aw.
And to be alive long enough to watch Gary watch you get inaugurated was absolutely everything to me.
So when you were in the courtroom and you said that this is where the change happens, what do you mean by that?
You see how you affect people's lives, not only protecting victims, but also defendants as well. And to be clear, when I was first a prosecutor, we had the mindset, which I mentioned in the other broadcast, is law enforcement used to have this attitude that I'm the police, you're not, I win, you lose. I'm always going to be right. And we weren't always right, and we know that now, and that's why I think it's so important that people with that historical knowledge are part of the change, because we've seen it, and we've seen what we've done to people. I mean, I've sat next to people, one of them is, I think, has been one of your guests, John Wallace, and he was talking, I remember as a sheriff's deputy, there was a list from the Housing Authority of people who were not supposed to be in Marin City because they had a criminal record, and thinking we're protecting the community. That was the mindset of that, right? So to hear him tell his story that when he got out of prison, he couldn't go to Marin City and visit his family. He couldn't be the partner that he wanted and even support his children in that way without getting in trouble. And you just don't realize the unintended consequences of what you think is a great idea. And to hear him talk about that with the pain that caused him when he really was trying to do the right thing. And he's just been brutally honest about that, but I appreciated that he said that. And when you go back and think how many times we could have changed people's lives, but just didn't know that was the right thing to do. Or even when I was a police officer, there wasn't mandatory reporting and guiding women to services for domestic violence cases, and we didn't even document those cases properly at the time. When
You've watched a sea change, Lori.
Right.
You've watched a sea change.
Yeah.
So what is it now if the authorities aren't always right?
What do you mean?
So back in the police days, right, you said that you had the mentality, or they had the mentality of, we're always right, we're going to win. What is it now? Or what do you mean for now?
I think now there has been a sea change in law enforcement, number one, that
I agree.
Officers are much more empathetic, and some of it has been through legislation, and some of it has just been through, again, seeing what worked and what didn't work and what's right for your community. But for me, then, from the law enforcement perspective, from the prosecutor's point of view, we're the ones that make the filing decisions after law enforcement contacts someone on the street, right? So we're the one who makes the decision that, okay, diversion programs, many people are eligible for them today, some are not, but to really, and to guide them to our treatment programs instead of punishment program. That's where we have
Amazing.
Yeah, and for me,
opportunity to make change.
for me, what I watch with your department as well as with the sheriff, growing in wisdom and Solomonic and Sarah wisdom, that like when I'm with Nicole and some of your other, Nicole Pantaleo, you watch them, they're processing things differently than district attorneys used to in the old days, and she is. And
And to your point, when you're in a courtroom, it used to be, there's the defendant, but now it's like, that's a person, he's got
Right.
children there.
Right.
And it's a full court press too, all from the streets of law enforcement to the courtroom. And
Right.
treatment programs are not always the answer, clearly,
Right.
but there's to really just see people for who they are and what they've been through and appreciate that, I think, more than we did before is really important. And for
Yes.
law enforcement to see how these programs are successful, because a lot of times I tell them, hey, remember so-and-so? Have you seen him around lately? No, I haven't, because they used to be in the turnstile. And yeah, that's because he's doing really well in a treatment program. And when an officer goes, I'd like to come see that. How does that program work?
Right.
Especially the mental health
Yeah.
programs. It's really, that's fun when a law enforcement officer says that. And it's meaningful.
when the light bulb comes on, right? Yeah.
And it's really meaningful to me when people in the defense bar say that a lot of things I've done have been, really bold and
Yes.
called me an activist. I love that. That's a first. But, to make some really bold decisions, especially during COVID, there was a lot of charges we just weren't filing, quality of life crimes, because we could not have people in our jail being exposed to COVID. And we
Right.
just had to make these hard decisions. And
First, do no harm. First, do no harm to a person who's trying to make their way back. So,
Yeah.
and it's not saying that's not, folks. Justice is you see the weight balance in the statue of justice. What is the right outcome? What is the fair outcome? And I always tell kids, life isn't fair, but we can be fair. And I think that's what your office has guided us to. And through your law enforcement career, through all of it, you've been that person that makes your parents proud. And man,
Makes your community proud.
yeah, exactly, Lori.
Yeah.
I mean, we're just amazing.
it's my honor. And I love my job.
I'll bet.
Every day I love it, and it's
Yeah.
just so fun when we work together. And
What's the most important thing that you've learned about leadership now you've gone up? Tain't easy, is it?
No, it's not easy. There's many things I hadn't been involved in before. Personnel issues, things like that I just never was involved in before. Although I was involved in union issues.
Right.
It's especially during COVID. Words matter and your actions matter. I think that's
Wow.
one of the biggest things. Is it really all our leadership team really had to step up and do things we had never thought about before. But we are really lucky that our workers are so committed, and we stayed open. Our legal support staff was there all through COVID. We had to be to process what reports that we had, and we did take that opportunity to go almost paperless. We're so close to it. And everybody's proud of that. And I think that's the biggest thing is to me, I'm just rewarded when people say, that was great, so-and-so did so great in this program. And it's this to really honor the successes, especially there might not be that many some weeks. There just
Right.
might not be. And to really try and keep your staff motivated. And we're just so lucky. People go to our office for a reason. They want to be the change.
Positivity
they wanna be the
is a force multiplier. Staying optimistic and positive during hard times.
That is really crucial. I would have to say listening was number one. I
Right.
really had to work and still continue to work my listening skills, but the positivity
Yeah.
is really huge. And as prosecutors, we kind of always want to think worst case scenario. And even as a police officer, you want to plan for the worst. You don't walk into a situation and not be careful. So having that mindset and having to step away from that with the power of positivity always is sometimes hard, I have to say. I have to fight myself.
You see so much. I mean, the trauma that comes in waves at district attorneys and cops
Right.
and highway patrolmen and firefighters and paramedics, that trauma can be seen. And that's why it's important for us to help people with that early childhood trauma of adverse childhood experiences that we're now teaching in prisons, where I learn when I'm talking about that, and young men will get up and share the sorrows of their early lives. And I remember being in a prison when I looked in the back and the correctional officer was crying because he said, I had it down as A unit, B unit, C unit, D unit. Now I know that it's a wounded child and a wounded adult who might wound others. And, it helps me to understand, not, as you said, when I told him, overstand, but understand. And when we move to that understanding, we're wiser as souls, and that's what you've done for your district attorney's office.
And it's a balance, because sometimes that's not the right answer either for some people. It's just not, sadly, and we have to acknowledge that too. And then while we're making this process to really help our victims in our community understand that this is for safety reasons. It's for everybody's safety.
Some folks you can't fix.
Right.
You have to say that. There are folks that don't believe that. But they need to be protected from themselves.
Sometimes, yeah.
Am I wrong?
No, you're right.
Well, I think we are. You're always right, Mike.
No. Perhaps you should come home to my family.
That's what he said to say.
Right. That's what I was paid to say, Mike.
Right? Well, Mike's always right. I got it right here.
Right. Well, thank you very much.
Nice.
I think that the biggest takeaways is the listening, right? The finding the common ground and collaboration. And I can't thank you enough for being on our show today, which is We Are the Remedy. But thank you more for being part of the remedy and the impact and the ripple effect that the work of your office and the collaborators and everybody working together, you can't measure it yet, but it's profound and it's impactful and it's saving people's lives. It's giving people the opportunity. So thank you, Lori Frugoli, for being on our show today.
Community unity.
Community unity.
That's what Michael said.
What he said, amen, for me. Ditto.
And
thank you so much.
You're welcome. And thank you, everyone, for tuning in today. Thank you for being part of We Are All the Remedy. Remember, go out there, share your story, be vulnerable with someone, find a connection, help someone out if you can, and at least smile at someone today. Like this. Not maybe with the mask, maybe without, but thank you again for being We Are the Remedy, and have a wonderful day.